So what is going on, guys? CeeGee here today. It's been a couple of days since my last video, and that is for good reason. I have been digesting and replaying through Red Dead Redemption 2 to make sure that this review for you guys, whether it be the spoiler section or the non-spoiler section, is perfect for you, and you make your mind up whether you want to buy this game if you are looking to this review for some kind of confirmation whether you want it, or whether it just think, you know, it's not my cup of tea. Now, like I said, spoiler filled, non-spoiler filled, the first part of my review will not be spoiler filled. I will leave a timestamp in the description below of when you can get to the spoiler part. So if you're only interested in me talking about that part of the game, then by all means click on that, skip to that part, and you know, we can talk about that together. But if you haven't played Red Dead Redemption 2 and would like to go into it absolutely blind, I would also recommend clicking off of this video, because there are some things you have to talk about in order to get a proper review going. So there's a few minor spoilers in the early part of the review, but they won't ruin the plot or anything like that. It's just very small details in the game that you might pick up on and go, oh, that's cool, but you'll obviously be going into the game knowing it. So if you want to go in blind, don't watch this video. If you want to just watch a review, don't really care about going into it blind, watch the first half, and if all you want to know about is the ending and all that kind of stuff, click to about halfway through this video, or the timestamp in the description below. But without any further ado, guys, I'm nervous for this because it is big. Okay, let's get into it. So firstly, I want to just talk about the world. Now, just before we actually fully get into this, there's not going to be any gameplay over the top of this, because I want you to just be paying full attention to what I'm saying. Like, if you're watching a gameplay, you might be distracted, whereas with me, a review, you kind of just have to listen. And with me personally, when I watch reviews, I prefer watching someone just sit and talk, because you want to know about the game. You know, if you want to watch gameplay, you'd watch gameplay. So firstly, I just want to talk about the world that you play in, and how incredibly detailed and, you know, graphically exciting it is. You know, the trees, the landscapes, the different biomes all blend together really well. You have swamps, you have deserts, you have heartlands, you just have sort of hilly fields, you've got the snowy mountains, you've got the grizzlies. There are so many different aspects to this world, and different sort of biomes. I would say biomes because of Ark, and you know, you have the different biomes. It's really weird, but you have them different areas that are all different styles, and they cater very differently. You know, you have to wear different clothes, and you have to eat different foods, and you have to regularly, you know, stay warm and shit like that. It's a very in-depth game in that sense, and it is filled with absolutely incredibly organic and natural feeling wildlife and NPCs. The wildlife in this game makes the game. The biggest thing that I'm worried about for Red Dead Online is that they take away the wildlife, because when I'm riding along and you hunt a squirrel or a rabbit, or you see a deer or an elk, or you get attacked by a bear or a wolf or a cougar or a panther, having that element of unpredictability within the world because of the wildlife makes a big part of Red Dead. So if you took that away from the online, it would be very, very empty in a weird sense. I feel like it would be a very empty, very dull, boring world without the wildlife, which is kind of what we don't want. We want the wildlife to be in online. We know crafting is a part of online, so hopefully the wildlife carries over as well. But what also occupies the world is the characters, and the characters are phenomenal. I'm only going to go over the two, I would say, main characters at the moment, of Arthur and Dutch, because I'm not going to step too much into the territory of who is who, because that will be for a little bit later on in the video. So Arthur, for me personally, he's the best video game character ever written. He's evil, he's nasty, he's a bully, but he's also lovable, good, and redeeming. You know, now I don't want to say too much, but the whole point of the game is redemption. It's Red Dead Redemption, and Arthur's story and Arthur's arc is a very satisfying arc when you get towards the end. It's a very pleasing arc, it's a very heart-wrenching arc, but it's also one of the best written character arcs I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing in video game history. Now, also talking about arcs is Dutch, because we know that this game was meant to be Dutch's downfall. The whole point of this game was how the first game came about, how Dutch's gang turned from this really nice, really cool family of outlaws into this broken, you know, group of individuals. And Dutch's descent into madness is honestly so compelling. Watching him at the start be this really, you know, slick, silver-tongued teacher, and then eventually turn into the Dutch we see from Red Dead 1 is an incredible character arc, and he is so well written. And it also is worth just noting that Milton and Ross are very, very good antagonists in this game. And if you think, Ross, what the hell? Yes, Edgar Ross is the sidekick to Milton, who are the Pinkerton detectives that are trying to hunt you down across, you know, across the country. So it's a cool little Easter egg that Edgar Ross is also in this game. He's not the head of the detective agency, but he's definitely there, you know, hot on your tail. But then also a big part of the gang is the other gang members and the camp system. You have these camps, and you live in these camps with your family, essentially. And that's what I really, really love, because the camps feel genuinely welcoming and warming and like a family home. When you get to chapter 1, 2, 3 and 4, especially the first 4 chapters especially, there is an unbelievable sense of togetherness and family that is just so cool. You go to the camp, everyone's there, you can talk to everyone, they welcome you, they say, oh Arthur, you're back, you know, and you're like, oh hi, you know, how are you, there he is, all that kind of cool stuff. And it genuinely makes you feel like you are part of this gang, and you are very engrossed in the characters, invested in the gang, and you are very, you know, it feels like you're there, it feels like you are part of the Van der Linde gang, and the fact that it is that welcoming is so cool. Now I mentioned that it goes up to chapter 4 because for me the story peaks at chapter 4. Chapters 1 through 4 go sort of like up like this, and then chapter 4 peaks. Chapter 5 dips a bit, chapter 6 goes back up a little bit, but then epilogue part 1 gets really low, and epilogue part 2 shoots back up to the top and sort of peaks again. And that kind of annoys me because it was consistently getting better and better and better and better till 4, and then 5 it just felt weak, it felt shaky, it felt kind of unoriginal from there on out. It kind of, I don't want to say unoriginal because it's a Rockstar game, and I don't want to shit on a Rockstar game. This game is my favourite game of all time, do not get me wrong. But there are just parts of the story and parts of the chapters and the epilogue especially that I started playing and I just thought, you know, this is just getting a little bit too monotonous for me. You know, the epilogue part 1 drags on a lot. Chapter 5, as much as it was visually pleasing, it was just, in my opinion, completely unnecessary. Now, obviously, you guys don't know what Chapter 5 consists of, but we could talk about that in the spoiler bit. We probably won't, but, you know, if you're that worried, I would recommend either getting the game and playing it, or just going and checking out my, you know, part of my streams with Chapter 5 in. And I just thought, you know, everything pre-chapter 4 is fantastic. It's phenomenal. It's amazing gameplay-wise, storytelling-wise, you know, gang-wise, the family and stuff like that. But then after chapter 4, it's kind of like the second half of the game. The game is definitely split into 1 and 2, and how it's the family and togetherness in the gang, and then the downfall of the gang. And that downfall is very depressing. It's very, you know, tonally different to the first part of the game, and it's sometimes quite hard to play through because you think, I've worked all this hard to keep this gang together, and all of this is kicking off and happening. And obviously, you know, I said I wouldn't spoil too much, but you have to talk about these things regardless. So yeah, but I feel like I've said everything I can say about the story and the characters and the campaign without going into spoiler territory. So I'm going to give you guys a warning. The heads up is here. We're moving into spoiler territory. Right, so you're still here? Are you still here? You're still here with me now. I just want to say this before you go into it. If you are one of these people that thinks, you know what, I don't really care having the game spoiled, I just want to know what happens, I want to play it, and then, you know, I want to know the review for it, click off this video. You do not want to go past this part of the review without playing the game. If you're just in this to find out what the review is, please don't do this to yourself, because you are going to sincerely regret it. Okay? Okay? Right. So for those of you brave souls that are still here, it's obvious the first thing we have to talk about, isn't it? The first thing we have to talk about is that. death. Now, Arthur Morgan, greatest character in my opinion, his death was horrible. It was so well written and so well done, but it was so brutal at the same time. I have never cried so much in my gaming life as much as I cried when Arthur laid on the rock, watched the sunset rise, and died because of tuberculosis. He died of a disease. If you got the bad ending and Micah stabbed you or shot you, then you are a terrible person and you can piss off. Whereas if you were a good man and a redeemable man, and you died watching the beautiful sunset, then you are in my boat, my friends, because that's the ending I got. I mean, I cried a lot. Just look at this. Just look at this. And that being said, you see how much I cried. If you're on the stream, you watched that live. Duke saw it live, and he was like, "Bro, what the fuck's happened? Are you alright?" So I was like tripping bollocks. I was in absolute pieces, man. I couldn't deal with that shit. But the biggest thing annoyed me about Arthur's death is I didn't want to play as John. I didn't want to play as John. I get it's kind of this poetic justice that at the end of the first game, John dies and you play as his son, and now in this story, Arthur dies and you play as his brother, John. But John Marston's story was 8 years ago. I'm just not invested in him anymore. If you played the original and you enjoy playing as John and you love John, then fair enough, then by all means do it. But when I got to the end and I finished the epilogue, I just felt empty. I just felt depressed. I felt sad because, I'd invested 40 hours into Arthur and his character and building him to be this good man that cares about his family, cares about his friends. For him then to be killed off and me to play as John, who I helped escape in the first place because of who I was, and it kind of just feels a bit bittersweet. I've invested 40 hours into Arthur, and I don't want to play in a world without Arthur. Arthur is the guy. He is the man, He is the main character of this story, and without Arthur, the game just felt very empty, And then at the end of the epilogue, John builds the ranch. Him and Abigail and John live there, and Jack live there with Uncle. They all live there happily ever after. But there's no Pearson, so you can't craft any more satchels. There's no, other things to do around camp. There's chores on the ranch, but there's no chores on the barn. Chores. There's no chores. There's chores on the ranch, but none on the camp. There's no camp, there's no more characters. Charles and Sadie are with you in the epilogue, but they leave. It's just you, Abigail, Jack, and Uncle. And as far as characters go, they aren't my favourite ones. I want the camp with Lenny and Hosea, and when Dutch was cool, and you know, and John when he was younger and more of a bandit, because there was an element of guiltiness that I felt when I did anything wrong. When I played as John after the epilogue, he's tried to get onto this new life, so when I did anything remotely bad, like steal a horse carriage or rob someone, I felt this genuine sense of guilt, because I was like, I shouldn't be doing this as John. John's a good man now. John shouldn't be robbing people. I shouldn't be doing this. So it felt kind of weird, and how they created this world and how you feel this guilt is kind of horrible. But there is one really, really awesome element to the epilogue, and that is the ending. When you fucking kill Micah fucking Hill. Now, obviously, a big spoiler part of this is Micah turns out to be the main villain of the game. Micah is the rat. He dobs you in, he snitches on you to the detectives, you find out about that, and that's how the rift between Arthur and Dutch and John and Dutch and all of them get caused. So, heading up that snowy mountain in the epic finale with the epic western style music as a lone wolf with Arthur's hat on John's head was one of the single most satisfying moments in gaming history, when Dutch shoots Micah, and then Micah looks at you, pulls his guns, and you deadeye and just fucking fill him with lead. That was one of the most satisfying killing moments in gaming history. It was so sweet to watch the man who killed Arthur Morgan fucking rot, because Arthur Morgan is so relatable. He's such a diverse, unique character that watching the man who killed him is the most satisfying thing. But again, it goes without saying, I feel just like it's time to move on from John. I love John Marston. John Marston is a fantastic character, and it makes all the first game so much sweeter now, knowing that you can go back and kill Dutch, Bill and Javier, who betrayed Arthur, the only one who had the realistic grasp on life and knew that civilization was going to destroy their world of freedom and they had to fall in line to the law at some point. He was the only one that was realistic, and that is what made him so special and so different to the other characters, because he knew that John had to get out of this life. He knew that John, Jack and Abigail had to move on from this life of crime, because they're a family. He has a kid, he has a wife. They're not meant to be on the run 24/7 from people trying to constantly hang them and kill them. It is horrible to watch the gang fall apart, but it's also a very pivotal part of the story. But like I said, John's story was 8 years ago. I've put 40 hours into Arthur. I would like to play as Arthur. At the end of the game, there should be a choice. There should be a choice that you can either go back and you can play a sort of like pre-chapter 5, when pre-chapter 5, you know, chapter 5 is the Guam Island. I didn't like that at all. Pre-chapter 5, end of chapter 4 before the bank robbery, so Hosea and Lenny and all of the good characters are still at the camp. They're still the cool characters are at the camp. Pearson's there, Mary Beth's there, Tilly's there. All of the strong characters and the welcoming characters are at the camp in the swamp, but they should unlock Blackwater and New Austin for Arthur to go and have a look around and just say, you know, this is the camp, this is your home, we've removed the bounties, blah blah blah, from Blackwater, you're free to do as you please. Or if you wanted to play as John because you're that strung up on reliving the first game, although it was 8 years ago and you should move on, then by all means play as John, live on the ranch with, you know, that miserable woman Abigail, Uncle who is comedy gold, and that really annoying child Jack. That's your choice, but don't take the ability to play as Arthur away from me, because I've started a new game and I'm leaving it at the end of chapter 4. At the end of chapter 4 I'm making a save and then I'm finishing the game, and then once I finish the game I'm going back to the chapter 4, because Arthur Morgan is that much of a good character and I want to play as him more than anything else, more than any other character. He is just the absolute core of this game, if you ask me, and that's why I don't want to play in a world without Arthur, because he is just the absolute heart and soul of this game. Character wise, you know, everything about Arthur is the classic story of redemption, and that's what makes this game so special. If I had to score this game, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. Post chapter 4 pisses me off that much that I would take it down from a 10 to a 9. The pre-chapter 4, the run up to chapter 5 is 10 out of 10, But chapter 5, 6 and the epilogue is a solid like 8. So it takes it down to a 9 for me. The characters, obviously all well written. I love this game more than anything. I would highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't played it. But I've had this little therapy session waffling on about how I love Arthur Morgan and declared my love for him because he's an incredible character. But without any further ado, guys, I've been your boy CeeGee. I hope this has helped you guys decide on whether or not to buy Red Dead Redemption 2. If you have had it spoiled and thought, shit, I shouldn't have watched that, I fucking told you. But I've been your boy CeeGee. This has been your Red Dead Redemption 2 review. I hope you have enjoyed, and I'll see you guys soon with a brand spanking new video. Goodbye.